Meanwhile, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin is dealing with a leak relating to their own abortion case. Chief Justice Annette Ziegler called for an investigation after Wisconsin Watch reported on the document, which indicates that the court will hear a case that seeks to make access to abortion a right protected by the state constitution. Now, the document that was leaked is a draft, not a ruling on the case. In her statement, the Chief Justice said all 7 justices are united in wanting to find out how this document was leaked to the press.